Hey everyone, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. I should have said hello everyone. I actually found out recently it's not chi ha ha ha, it's ki ma, and it's because that
Yes.
Jason's mom was summoning him to, or not him, but well, it's not really a spoiler, but it has to do with Jason's mom.
I just thought it was the knife cutting and then him laughing.
Yeah.
I've also heard people say murder.
Oh, that's good too. All that's good. But what a distinct sound! It's
yeah.
It
was right up there with Halloween with do. But today we are talking about slasher films on Friday the 13th, and we're talking with Jeff York from The Establishing Shot, Ian Simmons from Kicking the Seat, and Mark the Movie Man Crosscheck from Special Mark Productions. And I didn't know what topic to talk about this week, and someone brought up, well, Friday the 13th is coming up. And I said, well, I've never seen Friday the 13th. And I finally saw it for the first time, and it bored me. But, yeah, it bored me to tears.
But, Mike, that's one of the reasons I suggested we elevate it to the whole idea of the slasher genre
films
and what's involved in that and why we like that, which I think could be very fun and maybe for some viewers slightly educational.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, I feel like when I watch Friday the 13th, I'm like, this is a movie where this is exactly why you see a movie in the theaters, because it's fun to come in with your friends and scream and laugh together and have a good time. And that was when I was doing my research on the movie. That was kind of the idea when they made this film, that they wanted teens to come in with their friends and to enjoy it together and have a good scream and a laugh, and you're supposed to kind of be desensitized like the killer, where you're kind of having a good time watching everyone get killed. But before we get into any of that, let us start with Friday the 13th, and we'll go, I think, from right to left to right. So, Jeff, what was your introduction to Friday the 13th? I know you really like this movie. What turned you on to it?
Well, and it's kind of the filmmakers who did it, including director Sean Cunningham, will tell you they did it as sort of their answer to the big runaway hit that was Halloween. Halloween, when I was in high school, was a humongous deal, and it was very scary, and it was really cleverly done by John Carpenter, a director who had made his name with Assault on Precinct 13 and some other things. And, for him to do this was sort of a reinvention of the genre, in the sense that it was actually very elegant and very sort of low key. It was not that bloody and gory. There's only a few deaths in it, but it created a great deal of tension, created this interesting character backstory who comes home and, he's this warped mind. And then, you leave a couple of teenagers alone who kind of have left to their own devices, can't turn to the authorities. It's a busy night anyway, with the Halloween in the local community, where families are taking their kids trick-or-treating, or God knows, cops are probably busting up potheads smoking at their parties for Halloween or whatever. And so here these people are vulnerable. But that was a great hit. And then I heard that this one was sort of in that vein, albeit I would say on steroids in a way, because there were more deaths, a lot more blood and guts. I will say this just right off the bat. I saw it in the theater, and you're exactly right. You have to see it with an audience. And the audience I saw it with, I'm proud to say, both screamed and howled with laughter. I mean, some of it was very effective, very tense and scary, grant you. But you laugh at how cleverly it's done, even though some of it's badly acted. Looks like it was shot for $1.98 and stuff. Although those effects by Tom Savini were fantastic. I mean, the spitting blood.
Can't go wrong with Savini.
With the guy had to be blowing it out like, but that gave it the idea of the
when it comes through when you sleep in, and it
looked real to us, and that blood was darker. It didn't look like the Hammer Films blood and some of that stuff. But I will tell you this, that it was one of those films that I don't think is a great film, but it was a great time at the theaters, because it was so entertaining and so involving, and it had this amazing hook. And I dare say, and Ian and I are old ad guys, They did a phenomenal job on the advertising for this. I still remember, it might be one of my top 10 favorite commercials, where they went like, it's Camp Crystal Lake, and then you see the teenagers as like 1, 2, it just builds up. Like, what the hell, man? I got to see what that's about. But I mean, how brilliant! It's so effective. It's the brand, telling you the title right there. I mean, and as an old ad guy, you couldn't ask for something better from a Dove campaign or a Miller Lite, classic or something, as far as like really on the money. So for me, it was a lot of fun, albeit I think, and Ian has heard me complain about this many times. I think it's created its own monster, if you will, with sort of diminishing returns as it went on and on and on in films. But that first one was pretty funny. And, I mean, Harry Crosby was in it, and Betsy Palmer was doing Lux commercials at the time and was a Broadway star. But Sean Cunningham came from Broadway, and there were some Broadway actors in there, including Rex Everhard, who played Ben Franklin in the musical 1776. So it was very appealing, but shticky and funny, but also very effective and scary with what's doing that the giving you the identity of the camera through the villain going towards these people. Not only created mystery, but I think gave you an end to sort of like the villain in a way, just because you're seeing his point of view. So very, very well thought through, despite the fact that it was intended as sort of a ripoff of Halloween.
Yeah, very well put. Ian, what are your thoughts on Friday the 13th? On Friday the 13th.
Well, it's also this year is the 40th anniversary of Friday the 13th, Part 6, the final chapter.
Yeah.
Oh,
And unfortunately, I mean, here's the thing, Mike. I'm not surprised that you didn't like Friday the 13th, because it's in the same way that I no longer really like John Carpenter's Halloween. I appreciate it and I recognize its importance, but watching it now, it just, I mean, that to me, there's just something missing about it that I think other movies, not necessarily other Halloween movies, have improved on, but that's also the case with Friday the 13th. I don't think they're diminishing returns as they go on. You watch it for the kills, right? And a lot of the censors had a great time over the decades chopping these things up. And
Yes.
with the Blu-ray release from a few years ago from Shout Factory, they were able to recover some of those deleted scenes and finally see what everyone was gasping about. But I think it's a strong franchise. I think the first movie is very effective with a nice twist. I love the fact that it breaks the rules of establishing a character early on, and they're kind of, they might be a red herring, and then they show up and it's a surprise. It breaks Roger Ebert's law of the economy of characters, which is that there's somebody, if there's a mystery or a killer, you're going to meet them earlier in the film. It might be a surprise that it turns out, oh my gosh, it was the milkman. But we literally know nothing about Mrs. Voorhees until she shows up in the last 10 minutes and kind of gives her, Jason was my son and today is his birthday soliloquy. And then we're kind of off to the races with that climax. I think I saw some of the sequels or parts of them anyway on cable before I actually sat down and watched them from the beginning, when I was very young. That whole kind of sneaking downstairs to watch cable. Your parents are asleep or they're in another room, and I can watch the first 10 minutes of part 5, and it still freaked me out. But yeah, I think I am not a fan of all of the movies, but I'm a fan of a lot of the movies, and I think they were very influential, and they caused people, specifically with Savini's effects, to up their game. And even some of the lesser known slashers in the genre, like The Burning, which I think is a better film than Friday the 13th, which came out the year after this. It's a ripoff of that, but it's also got Savini doing the gore effects and him trying to outdo himself, I think, very effectively. It's got an all-time classic raft scene. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch The Burning and you will be shocked and amazed. Long-winded answer. I think it's a solid franchise, and I wish there was more of it. Unfortunately, they got tied up in a decades-long legal suit, which has been resolved in some capacity, but now the rights are all split, so it's just a giant mess. Much like Mr. Christie said when he was describing The Rain right before he got a knife to the chest.
Yeah, there are no long-winded answers on this show. We are here for the long haul. But no, very very well put. Mark, what did you think of Friday the 13th?
Oh, well, I actually didn't see part 1 in the theater. I saw it on video and on cable. I actually saw part 3 first, where he actually gets the mask. Because that was the one that was the most cable fodder. That was the one that really picked up for everybody. I think that was when it was in its full swing, when it really got to the peak of popularity, where people are like, oh, I got to see this now, because you had one and everybody's like, not too familiar with the genre. But by the time 3 came out, people were hungry for it. So I saw 3 first, and then I went back and I saw the first 2. And yeah, I'm with Ian as far as I can see why you may not have found it as interesting, Mike, because it's just like when we do retrospectives on very older films on our show on the Spoiler Room. It's one of those where you can see where stuff comes from, but other films it's been done so much from when it first came out that now looking back at it, you're like, yeah, but you also appreciate that, yeah, before this, you only had Halloween, and so. And in this one, I would argue that Jason, the kills in that not only are more creative, but they have a more of identity to them. In John Carpenter's Halloween, while they're good, they're few and far between, and they're just kind of straightforward. They aren't creative. They get creative later so he can keep up with Jason. But Jason, and Mrs. Voorhees, and that those kills in Friday, those were the ones that were just extreme. Like, wow, they showed that, and they show it. You get the knife coming out of the neck. It's a wonderful effect in that, and you get other kills as well that I think caught people off guard because they didn't realize that, you could portray it like this on screen. I mean, the closest thing you would probably get, and Ian and could definitely correct me if I'm wrong because of his knowledge on it, but the closest thing you got is if you watched Italian horror. If you do Italian horror, you probably were more familiar with kills of this type,
or exploitation movies too. I think that grindhouse stuff that most people did not see.
Right.
Well, famously, it was Mario Bava's Bay of Blood, which came out in the late or mid to late 70s. There's a kill in Friday the 13th Part 2 where a couple are in bed, having sex, and they get run through with a spear. Now, Sean Cunningham swears up and down that he had no idea that was a thing when he was producing Part 2, but it's pretty undeniable. But Bay of Blood, they did it better. But in the uncut version of that scene in Part 2, then it becomes kind of an arms race because it's really graphic and really intense. Yeah. The one thing I want to say, Mark, about one of the things that I didn't appreciate about Friday the 13th until watching it a few times and getting older is you don't see all the kills.
No,
it's probably about half and half, where you see the aftermath of them, particularly at the end when you've got Alice running around the camp and she discovers Harry Crosby's body. Like the door to the power shed opens and he's impaled on it and just horribly dead. What that does for me is try and imagine what that kill is like and what Mrs. Voorhees was doing. Like, was she yelling and screaming and cackling? Because that is a hate death. Because you see, he's been pinned up there by arrows, and one of the arrows is right through the crotch.
Yes.
So I don't know what was going on in that moment, but it sparks the imagination, which you wouldn't think from this Z-grade slasher film.
Well, when you find out why she kills them, it's definitely a hate death because and I don't think this is a spoiler. This movie's like, God only knows how many years
over 40
old
years old. 45, 46.
Yeah. It turns out Mrs. Voorhees went out and killed everybody because when her son was in that camp, he wasn't being paid attention to while he drowned, and 2 of the counselors went and fornicated. And because of that, her son died. So, an arrow through the crotch is probably like, this is what you'll get for making love when my son. And I don't know if they ever addressed this, but like, was Jason like a special needs kid or something? Because he had like a shaved head and he was kind of slow and So
he was special needs. And
she kind of addressed that by just kind of like hesitating and saying he wasn't a very good swimmer.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark. I cut you off.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that yeah, it's one of those films where you don't see that coming, but when they do have her reveal, you can see it, if that makes sense. In that you don't really see her at all, like Ian said, and Jeff also talked about it. It's like you don't see Mrs. Voorhees, but when you see her and you learn her motivation for killing everybody, you're like, I'm not exactly justifying it, but you can understand why she did it, and let's face it, that's another thing I think doesn't always get talked about, especially these earlier slasher films, but the slasher film is a morality play.
Yeah, always is.
There are morality plays wrapped in blood most of the time. The good ones are, to where, if you're sinning, you look at who usually dies right away. Your sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, usually under, when you're not supposed to. And that's when the killer goes after them, more so than anyone who might not be doing any of that.
Well, it's funny too, because in this movie, as well as Halloween, and I dare say, even when you look at like murder mysteries and sometimes, lack of a better term, police procedurals, be they on the small screen or big screen, a lot of it comes down to how much you're paying attention to. And did you make it to the final 10 minutes of the movie that way? Because in Halloween, I would argue that he's not necessarily a sexist killer, even though I think 3 of the 4 kills are women. It's that they're not really paying attention to the danger around them. And Laurie, because she's the babysitter who has to be present and conscientious, is aware of sort of the shift in the sands in this little quaint town. Here, they get distracted by strip monopoly, which that means they're going to be there for a week, getting naked and orgy worthy of Eyes Wide Shut. But so they're not necessarily paying attention. I will say this, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this as you've revisited it, but I have a new appreciation for Ian liking the franchise, and certainly, Mark, what you devote a lot of your show and fandom to is these are morality tales, and there is a certain amount of skill. Now, grant you, this is not going to necessarily, be considered high art, but Cunningham and his writers did a pretty good job of, you're right, Ian, not showing all the kills and creating drama about that. And where are these people? And when they are revealed, they're legitimate, worthy jump scares, not just the fake cat bounding across the room, as so many people have done over and over again. There's logic to it. Mrs. Voorhees makes perfect sense as that, even if she breaks the Roger Ebert rule, which is great. I also think that, and maybe because Cunningham comes from the world of Broadway and there's a certain amount of theatricality and, entrances and exits and stuff like that. It's very funny how he plays with expectations. The one girl who's in the bathroom with the showers, and, that's prolonged for a long time. She's like, come out here, and then you're wondering what's going on. And, all these sort of fits and starts. It's really great at building tension. And, you don't need a lot of money to do that effectively. And he didn't, but he did that very effectively. And then even to the point where, I know it's almost a cliche from the days of, the Tingler and some of those William R. Castle things, but, the shadow of the axe on the wall letting us know so we can sort of prepare ourselves for it. That's been ripped off or done just like that in much classier films, whether it's The Omen, and gee whiz, I wonder what's going to happen now that lever on the truck is loose and here comes that glass plate towards the photographer. And, Richard Donner did that in The Omen very effectively. Yeah. And, many people have done it in cheaper films and fairer than this, but those kind of tropes and whatever you want to call them, cliches, can be done very well. And I dare say, I think they were done very well here. You're right. I'd forgotten, Ian, and you made the salient point. I thought all these deaths were on screen, like, the famous one with the arrow through Kevin Bacon's throat, but at least 3 or 4 of them were not. And, there's that buildup where she finds Harry Crosby on the door. The girl comes crashing through the window and some of those kind of things.
Well, and that the girl that comes through the window, it's very interesting because, she is playing strip monopoly and she's, one of the, cooler girls in this camp. But what's she doing when she dies? She's going out because she hears someone crying out in the woods and she thinks there might be a kid out there, and she gets kind of drawn out, and then she gets drawn onto the archery range and the lights come on and everything, and it cuts away and you hear her scream, and it's not like scream queen kind of scream as we know it. It's really a scream of suffering and surprise, which makes it very. I don't know if that was an intentional kind of detail, but it's very distinct. And you also feel bad because she was nice, and B, her last act was trying to do something altruistic. It's not like she was sitting around smoking dope or something. It's kind of a tragedy, and it speaks to the madness of Mrs. Voorhees. She just thinks this ground is sacred. No one's coming back here. And when we do hear her story, it calls back to mind what the truck driver was saying in the very beginning of the film, where the two counselors died, and then a few years later they tried to reopen the camp. The water was bad, so I imagine that was some like tinkering on Mrs. Voorhees' part. It's a simple slasher movie, but it's laying the ground for some lore that would be expanded on, through the next, decade plus, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Here's the thing with this movie is that I think it's because I did see so many slashers before this, primarily Halloween, where I'm like, oh, okay, I've seen this before. Like when they do the first shot of the movie, it's a POV from the killer's point of view. I'm like, oh, where did I see that before? Oh, yeah, the beginning of Halloween, and of course, like even the ending when you think everything's okay and Jason jumps out of the water and grabs the girl. It's like, oh, that's the ending of Halloween as well. When, you think Michael Myers is dead and then, you walk out and, oh, the body's gone. Oh, no, he's still around. So like I saw all those things. And it's funny, like my introduction to the slasher genre was Scream. And I saw that on VHS. And I remember distinctly that I'll always know that the first Friday the 13th is not Jason.
Yeah.
Because he points it out to Drew Barrymore, like you should know that, so that is Pamela Voorhees who's a killer, Jason's mother. He doesn't come until the second film, and then you're like, oh.
And, that's true. Well, I mean, and then I think this is maybe part of the discussion too, is where it went from there. I mean, I think that's a great point about, you get either a quality actress who gives it a different spin. I think a lot of these people were from Cunningham's world of young actors that he had seen audition and be around the theater world. But they weren't quite as cartoonish as I think so often they become in these things where, they're introduced with one sort of awful trait. I mean, even by the third one, where there's the one guy who's, shooting the, what do you call those things? The Dennis the Menace weapon. What's that called? Slingshot at the girl's butt. And you can't wait for him to be killed. And that's where I think the shift in some of the subgenre takes place, where you start to cheer for Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees and even Michael Meyer, because the people are awful and they're kind of worthy of death and just stupid. Yeah. Where here there was, these people were even that first kill where they show the two counselors in the yellow shirts making out, and you get that kind of slow motion shot where they're running away from it, but they can't get away from the killer coming towards them. But it's interesting because both of those kids play it as embarrassed, and it's a pretty decent performance from both of them. Like, oh, we were, just doing this. I mean, they're not trying to be assholes. They're trying to be, hey, I'm trying to identify with this character. And he would probably be humiliated that he thought he was just having fun. And now suddenly he's been caught being derelict. That's different than, the umpteenth, attempt to enter this genre that we've seen from not just the sequels and some of those other things, but ripoffs of these films where, you just introduce these awful people and you can't wait for them to get it. And that's why you cheer for the bad guy. I mean, I think what's the one with the clown who we've talked about on your show, Mark?
What?
No, not the clown. The other one who's got the black eyes and it's really cheap.
Oh, Terrifier?
Yeah, the Terrifier.
Yeah, Terrifier.
I mean, to me, it was more often than not, they're just, when the police walk into a 7-Eleven and they don't have any sense to know how to just even handle a 7-Eleven where there's already been a killing. It's like, well, then they deserve to be killed. Where I think here, she was answering somebody's scream at maybe a kid in the field and she went out concerned about it. That's a noticeable and important difference, I think.
Yeah, and the thing was when the way that filmmakers approached this movie, when I was reading up on it, is like, Halloween, you're not rooting for anyone to get killed. Like, you're legitimately like worried and for these people who are being offed. Where in this film, it was more like you saw it from the killer's perspective. You understood their motivation, So like when these people were getting killed, you didn't feel like, oh no, you're like, oh yeah, fuck that guy. I don't care if he's dead, and that's kind of how the slasher genre from that point kind of went with a lot of franchises, Halloween included. When it comes to my favorite kill in a slasher movie, I think it's from Halloween 5, Curse of Michael Myers, where there's like the guy in the laundry room and he like somehow sticks a dude's body to the laundry machine.
Oh, that's 6. I think that's 6.
Oh, is that 6? The one
Yeah,
where he's
that's
like possessed like by a bunch of like cult
Well,
dudes.
after 5 and 6, he becomes possessed in 4, 5, and 6 is when they try to play the angle of zombie Michael, basically similar to Jason. And I think you're thinking 6. If I remember correctly, that's 6 where he stuffs the guy into the washing machine, because that was the first movie my wife and I went to see was Halloween.
Wasn't that the mother though? I thought that was the mother in part 5 because
that might have been.
It was a guy. Yeah. He was stuck to a laundry machine and his head explodes.
Oh, okay. That might be a different one. Then,
it was the one with Paul Rudd in it.
That would be 6.
It would be 6. Yeah, that's 6.
Yeah.
So I mean,
or Anthony Zerbe.
Well, here's the thing: is it was a very popular thing in the 80s. It's not quite as much now, but this I think attributes back to what we've talked about before: is limited screens and limited, wide release in that, and trends in that. Whatever suddenly became hot, like a movie, a surprise blockbuster, so many people tried to replicate it so quickly. Friday the 13th suddenly got a whole bunch of, counselor killers. Conan the Barbarian, 1982. Because of Conan the Barbarian, you had so many sword and sandal sorcery movies come out after that, as well. 80s did that, but at the same time, one of the reasons why many of us still consider, and it's not just rose-colored glasses or Gen XO, is it is a golden age for horror. Is this was the time when they were still feeling out what they could get away with to the audience. With the horror films. I mean, Friday the 13th is a classic example. Nightmare on Elm Street was another one that later on would come out. They were testing the audience. They're like, okay, just how much of this kill can we show? Just how much can we really make the killer both scary yet have a bit of a personality? I mean, they were really testing the waters. So the first 5 years of the 80s, when you really get this ramp up of horror, it's really cool to see them come out with. I mean, look at Sleepaway Camp. I don't think enough people talk about Sleepaway Camp with this shocking ending. You're like, hey, Friday the 13th, you had Mrs. Voorhees as a killer. Guess what? Wait.
Hold on a second. Mike, have you seen Sleepaway Camp?
No. Do the kids kill?
I'm not going to ruin it.
I just wanted to make sure you didn't slip anything out there, Mark.
I'm not. I'm just going to say the ending of Sleepaway Camp is like, okay, I will see your Mrs. Voorhees and we're going to do this. And audiences were like, what?
Well, Mark, you also raised, I think, a very good point in that this was sort of taking horror to some degree out of the grindhouse. I mean, one of the things that, Ridley Scott did with Alien and Steven Spielberg did with Jaws, and, even going back to Wes Craven, who was associated with Cunningham as a colleague when they first did The Last House on the Left. That was not really what you would consider to be typical grindhouse horror. It was, kind of home invasion, which we still are seeing all the time with The Strangers and other kinds of movies and such. But, it was asking some of the same questions that 60s and 70s and 80s films were about: roles of women, roles of family, roles of morality, vengeance. Where is the line drawn? What do you do to defend yourself? Straw dogs. I mean, it just opened up, I think, a whole conversation about violence and what it could be. I mean, you had right alongside these kind of movies, you had big ticket filmmakers like Brian De Palma doing Dress to Kill. And, some of that's very controversial today, but I can tell you it was a big ass hit at the time. And he was, up there with, the kind of auteur person. And he was mostly making, violent kind of killer on the loose or slasher films, albeit elevated as you were, and with a great deal of panache, just like the Italian cinema often did. And so I think it broadened so much what horror could be. Yes, there was room for, the pure exploitation, but then you also had these films, dare I say, like Halloween. The biggest surprise I always get when people say, "What was the scariest movie you saw?" Well, up until maybe, I don't know, The Descent, where you not only have the claustrophobia of being in caves, but these sort of zombie people who've lived under there as humanoids for decades and and coming after you too. But Halloween really got me because it seemed realistic. It wasn't too gory. You didn't get the comfort of like, oh, that looks like red paint, which I think always made the Hammer films more fun than scary in a way, even though they were certainly scary. But that was done realistically, and it kind of measured, so it made it all the scarier. This movie, while being much more so with showing the deaths and all that violence played pretty real. I mean, Tom Savini previously had done Dawn of the Dead, and I remember almost losing my lunch when the zombies pull apart the guts of the biker who falls in the thing.
Oh,
and yet, if you look at that today, it looks like macaroni and Prego or something. Like it doesn't really look much like any intestines I've ever seen in an autopsy or a medical book. Not that I've seen that many of them, but here, just that artery sort of spurting the blood out was convincing. And it's so funny the way they had Kevin Bacon underneath there and that whole body thing. It's a great effect. But I think it really broadened what horror can be, and some of it more insinuating than others. But a lot of great filmmakers started dabbling in it and doing a hell of a job. Look at Stanley Kubrick, even dabbling in it with the big ticket The Shining. So
same year as Friday the 13th. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like both the sort of sublime and the ridiculous in a way, but they were both incredibly effective in their own way, and you can't dismiss one versus the other in many realms.
And I'll say it that while we're all talking, Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers, The Godfather, the one that I think showed folks walked so folks like this could run, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh yeah,
probably one of my top favorite horror films.
Yep.
I love what I really love the most about, there's so many things I love about that movie, not just because it's based off of his house is based off of Ed Gein here in Wisconsin, but what I love about it is
that any way to talk about your Uncle Ed? Come on.
Yeah, I know.
It's a great way to be like, oh, at least my town's represented with serial killers.
It's a half hour
Plainfield slashers.
Half hour away. But what Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think, started to show some filmmakers who wanted to do horror was you could do a lot with the theater of the mind. One of the things I love about when people talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, oh, how gory it is. And I look at it and go,
there's no blood.
Really?
Barely.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you don't get a lot of on screen. In fact, this is spoilers because this movie's as old as I am, 50 years old, but very first really bloody kill you get on screen where you actually see it in its full glory is like 15 minutes before the end of the movie when the guy gets into the wheelchair, and that's when you're seeing the blood actually spurting it. Up until that, there's sound design, there's some brutality, but as far as actual gore or blood, the environment and such around it alludes to your mind thinking it's gorier than it actually is, but it shows you how it tested audiences, and by that folks took that concept and built upon it. So then you got your Halloweens, you got your Friday the 13th, who took that concept to like another level, to a more mainstream audience.
I would say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would say one thing is that movie, I think it feels bloody because it's just so filthy. Just like that house they go to, it's just like you can watch it and you can just imagine what the smell was like. And then when I read the behind the scenes, it smelled exactly like the way you think. And it was like hot and just miserable. And Toby Hooper.
But isn't it interesting that by that era, and again, I think I've always thought that, when people say, well, how do you be creative? They've asked me that for decades in advertising, like, what's your approach to it? And I've always said, if you're brainstorming and there's a simple place to start, and it does not always create Genius or great, but it's a good start because it gets you easily putting down stuff that you can compare and contrast with, and that is juxtaposing something that's against something that normally doesn't fit. Like, for example, when they did those cheer commercials back in the day where they did the product demos and they put them in like the martini shaker and they had opera music playing. It's like we'd seen dozens and dozens and dozens of, this stain versus that stain. And look how this one got it out. But, to do it as sort of operatic performance art, it had never been seen, so it gets your attention. Here, I think one of the bold and great things about Texas Chainsaw is it seems so real because it was shot like a documentary. It was handheld. It was not having that slick sort of fake Hollywood look like, that they had from the Vincent Price era where everything was either, Victorian or, bad special effects with like a fly suit, that had a bad hand that, you could have made in high school. And, you could give it this elegance and sexuality and glossiness like De Palma did in some of his stuff, even to some degree Carrie. Or you could go for, this sort of cheeky attempt, which was Friday the 13th, and yet very cleverly done. I would argue that Steven Spielberg, part of the reason that Jaws is so successful is not only is it scary, everybody wonders what's underneath the water because they can't see it. And you get Robert Shaw's great story about the Indianapolis and the bomb, but you also punctuate these terrifying moments with incredible humor. I mean, talk about puck. Steven Spielberg had such a puckish sense of humor, like, you boys okay? And then bite. And then you see this leg and you think, oh, he's dead. And he's floating at the bottom. No, it's just the leg. That's hilarious. Even though it's awful, it's hilarious. Or, of course, I would argue in cinematic history, I don't know if anybody's created one of the greatest scares followed by one of the greatest laughs, and that is, straight ahead for the head. I can go ahead, come down and try chumming some of this shit. The shark first appears that we see his full face, and then immediately cuts to Brody with that.
Yeah, the cigarette in his mouth, and he's just like,
I think it's hilarious. So you're like, ah! And then you immediately, build on that with a laugh. So, there's all kinds of places where the juxtaposition of documentary or cheek or humor or elegance or sensuality, and even the Catholic stuff that often showed up in Italian horror as it is wont to be in the Roman Catholic home. It showed that horror can play off a lot of broad things, and we think it's scarier and often bloodier because it gets to us even though we don't see that much. Look at Alien. You see nothing in Alien, but little clips of stuff, and it's terrifying. I mean, I think it's just as scary to see Captain Dallas stopped in the electronic screen as it is when we think Yaphet Kotto gets his head burst by the tail or whatever of the thing, but we're not quite sure. It's all suggestive and plays well.
And I feel like the granddaddy to these might be Psycho. Like Alfred Hitchcock was like the first guy to really kind of make murder and death marketable, because back then that was pretty graphic, because there is blood in Psycho. I mean, in black and white it kind of looks like Hershey's chocolate syrup, but like
which it was, yeah.
Oh, it was. Oh, there you go.
It was. It literally was Hershey's chocolate syrup.
Yeah.
And
did
like,
not appreciate that either.
But
although I'm sure people sold it just so they could say, yeah, it does kind of look like that in the shower. It's like, what do you care what they buy it for? As long as they take it off the shelf, Mr. Hershey.
Yeah. I mean, they could come up with like the red food colored version of it. But like that movie was terrifying because I feel like a lot of people like slashers because in a way it makes you feel safe. It makes you feel like, okay, well, I'm not going to go to a cabin in the middle of the woods or,
Right. My day was bad at work, but it's not as bad as Marion Crane's day.
Yeah. But like in Psycho, it's like, well, I'm going to have to take a shower. And that kind of really gets into everyone's mind. Like, even when I go in the shower, ever since I saw that scene, I'm like, sometimes I'll look and I'll be like, wait, there's no one there, right? Yeah, and that movie put that thought in your head, like, no, you're not safe wherever you go. And that's what made it more terrifying. And then these other filmmakers came out and they kind of made like safer, funner versions of a slasher, not like Psycho. Psycho's more like psychological, blah blah blah, and these are more kind of like fun, campy popcorn poppers. But he really kind of got the idea of where to take the audience in an unexpected direction by killing like the lead within the first few minutes, and then you get movies like this where usually the lead lives. Like I thought she died. I thought the original ending for years was Jason comes and grabs her and she dies. But it turns out afterwards she's in the hospital and
Right.
they're kind of talking about what happened, which there is a deleted ending from The Shining where Shelley Duvall's in the hospital and they're talking to her about what happened afterwards, but it's deleted, which thank God it is. That ending would have taken away all the impact just from that old photo from the New Year's Eve ball or the July 4th ball.
And I think that was, if I remember correctly, that ending was pretty much identical to what we see at the end of Friday the 13th. So it's all for the good. Yeah, I mean, Psycho. Everyone talks about the shower scene, but the most impactful death I think in that movie for me was Arbogast, the detective, going up the stairs because
the staircase.
The staircase. Yeah. When he gets attacked, not only is that wacky falling trick with the camera, but he gets slashed in the face. Like that's the first cut, and you just see that look of surprise and just that slash, and then when he gets to the bottom of the stairs, she's on him and just like attacking him again. It's wild.
And it also, I think one of the things too they talked about when they interviewed Sean Cunningham about Friday the 13th, he said he felt that one of the templates that the genre had started to create was you've got this sort of backstory that explains why the killer is doing what he is, and maybe even starts the movie off that, and that was something different, but it started kind of with Michael Myers, I guess, and Halloween and some others. But the other one was, teenagers, because, you want them to come and see it. It's a date night kind of thing. And, they'll come in with their buddies as well. But the other thing that was kind of unspoken about this, but in many ways it's in The Shining, it's in a lot of these, is the sense of isolation. Like you can't really just easily get out of there, especially like Texas Chainsaw. Can you get out of that house? With these crazy people slamming doors and they know the passageways and you don't, and you don't have a car anymore, or whatever, No, so it plays that psychological mind game. It's when you're in the shower, Mike, and you're looking for somebody. It's like, well, first of all, you're naked and vulnerable, but also if they come in, you don't have anywhere to go. You're fighting naked, and good luck, and even on the stairs. Where do you go from that? I mean, you can't get away from it. He doesn't have any chance to escape. But it plays on certain places where you think you're safe in certain places, but there's isolation. Even like an Alien. I mean, can they get off that ship? I mean, it's not like you can say, well, I'm just going to get in the car and drive out of town, which they always should, or not go in that house, but they don't. So I think that, Friday the 13th played that very well, because there's no adult supervision around either. And these kids are kind of left to their own volition, and
it's also that they don't know that they're in a horror movie, and
that's
I think
right.
that's I find this I watched a lot of these movies when I was way too young, and I think it implanted some fears into my head that I'm still grappling with today. Like I can't take the garbage out after dark with because I have to walk outside my house through the backyard into the alley. That whole thing with the locking gate, right? And but people ridicule these movies because they're like, oh, they're dumb teenagers. They're just, they're not paying attention to anything. Well, how much do we really pay attention to mundane things that we're doing?
Right.
They don't know. Maybe by the time you get to the 7th Friday movie where people are in the woods and they know that there have been murders happening and the same killer keeps apparently coming back. But in the context of, an earlier entry, like, you're just walking through the woods. You're just going into an abandoned cabin because you heard something.
Right.
It could be, you're just curious. You're not expecting an axe murder or a supernatural spirit to be in there. So that's one of the things. Mike, you mentioned the sense of safety. That kind of triggered me to think about. Well, I don't necessarily feel safe when I'm doing mundane things. I think that's something these filmmakers kind of tap into.
Because I think one guy's is he doing the laundry in Halloween when Michael Myers does like that whole thing where he stabs him and he's hanging on the wall and he's doing the head tilt.
He's in the laundry room. He's in a laundry room, but he's just looking. He gets.
I should
know the first one or the 5th one.
First one. Yeah.
Oh no, he was coming back from getting beer. I think.
That was he's getting a beer after he had
a
some
great
fun.
point too, that the Hitchcock rule of show the audience everything and make the people on screen only see piecemeals of it, so they don't realize they're in danger. And you're right, we know these councils are all in danger because we see them disappearing one after another and being slaughtered. But for these other guys, well, it's camp and maybe they're out screwing around the woods or God knows where. They don't even think that them being missing is a thing because they're not given the same information we are. It's another very clever thing. Same with everything that happens in Alien and all that kind of stuff. We're there when the people are killed. The other people find out much later. So we're in the know, and we're kind of, I don't want to say accomplices, but we're certainly in the first row of knowing exactly where they are and what happened to them.
Well, if you, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say to build on what Ian was saying about the common things that you do, and that's what it plays to. I mean, you mentioned Psycho. Hitchcock got letters for years from people saying after they saw his movie, they couldn't take a shower anymore. People literally were taking baths after his film and could not take showers just because of that scene. And, it's a common thing that people take, but, in this case with Friday the 13th, the teenagers are doing teenager things during summer camp, especially 18, 17, 16, 17, 18. So when you have something that connects to your demographic, your audience who's sitting there going, yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, I'd be making out. And I'm like, oh, I'm making out and there's a killer behind me. And you mean someone could come up behind and stab me and I wouldn't even know? You're like, taking those common behaviors and making them not safe is what really, especially these early slasher films, hinged on.
Yeah. And like the funnest thing that they would do is like, I think when I said you have a sense of safety, it's like, that you're watching a blockbuster and you're like, well, this likely won't happen to me. Oh, the likeliest thing is if someone's going to kill you, they're not going to be immortal. You can kill them back. So there's that right there. You're not going to literally have the boogeyman. You're not going to have Jason. And Freddy Krueger is not going to kill you in your dreams.
But we have learned, Mike, from statistics as well as television, is that 90% of the time the killer is somebody that we know and somebody that we love.
Yeah.
But also
that's why The Shining was scary. Yeah.
But as far as
he wasn't a very loving dad, he was a prick father.
But as far as you mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street, what that plays to is off of Wes Craven's research into what was actually happening to people. Not necessarily some people were actually having heart attacks because they were getting so scared in their nightmares, and a lot of folks suffer from night terrors, which is what Nightmare on Elm Street played on. So Nightmare on Elm Street kind of upped the game to where, okay, now that you've got your summer camp and your teenagers doing things, well, now you're not doing anything but sleeping. And now the killer can come into your dreams and kill you in your sleep. Well, what the hell? I can't sleep because I'm going to die. If I'm awake, I can't do anything because this guy's going to kill me. So you're suddenly,
And I love the fact that Freddy Krueger, he was very opposite from the other killers because they're all silent. And Freddy Krueger is just a shit talker. Like, he just goes around, he's like, I'm gonna kill you, bitch. And he makes like,
he's even a comedian with his puns and stuff,
Well, he didn't really, if you watch this series, and we've discussed this before, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is still where it was, he was very scary, but also he could do his quips and one-liners. It was after 3 when he got far more, 3 and 4, I should say, when he got far more comical. When you get to 5 and Freddy's dead, he's pretty much a caricature of himself. He's literally the quippy guy, but that's just like Jason. By the time you get to zombie Jason, well, now you're like
Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh God.
I mean, the title right there, it's like, where do we go after this?
It's so funny. Jason Takes Manhattan was the only Jason movie I saw, Friday the 13th movie I saw before I saw the first one recently.
Oh no.
And I saw it on VHS tape. And 90, and I found out when doing my research that most of that movie took place on a boat because they didn't have a budget. And then when they had to film in New York, they couldn't film in so many locations, which is why 90% of it takes place in alleys. And then there's 2 minutes where they're in Times Square. Yeah. Where I'm gonna guess they had to guerrilla film make that, where they're filming and then the police are like, "Do you have a permit?" And they're like, run. I don't know, but
no, they did a full shoot in Times Square because Kane Hodder talks about that being one of his like they made the crowning achievement of his career because they blocked things off and the fans talking to him and stuff between takes. But I mean, that's the other thing about these slasher series is as they go on, they all try and evolve the stories to keep from just being body count movies.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have similar trajectories where they do an experiment that fails horribly. And coming back from the experiment, they relaunch it as something that kind of defines the rest of the series. I mean, with Halloween, you had Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which Michael Myers makes a cameo on TV in a bar that is showing the movie Halloween.
Yeah.
And then
how did they get cameras there? But yeah,
I don't know. With Nightmare on Elm Street, you had part 2, which was a departure from the first one, and kind of stands alone. But then in part 3, to Mark's point, you've got Dream Warriors, which kicks off the Dream Warriors trilogy. And then Friday the 13th, you've got part 5, which was a new beginning because they'd done the final chapter, which Paramount wanted to be rid of these movies. So like, fine, we'll give you a decent budget. We'll bring Savini back. We'll kill him off for good. The problem is everybody and their mothers showed up for that movie. So like, well, shit, now I got to make another one. They tried to go a different route by having Jason not be the killer in 5. But then part 6 is Jason Lives. And that's, believe it or not, the first appearance of Zombie Jason. He was alive through part 4.
Wow, I never knew that.
Wasn't
he dead as a kid though? Like when he jumps out of the water?
They retcon. Well, they don't so much retcon. They just kind of do a weird explanation in part 2 as to what happened. He was assumed to have drowned in the lake, and they never found a body. But apparently, he got to shore, but he just ended up living in the woods because I guess he was so far out he couldn't make his way back to camp and find his mother or something. And by that time, she'd gone psycho. So he grows up into this like deformed, depraved, wood-dwelling guy who doesn't want these people around his camp. Plus, he somehow witnessed his mother get beheaded, and so he takes on the mantle of the one seeking revenge. Anyway, parts 2, 3, and 4 all happen within about the same week.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Which is very strange considering in part 4, there's a survivalist character who comes to avenge the death of his sister who had been killed a while ago by Jason.
Now, you see, this is, and the thing is, I'm glad you brought up Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, because the whole plan with Halloween was that it wasn't going to be Michael Myers. It was going to be like an anthology series. And that would have been interesting because I actually find Halloween 3 to be kind of creepy. Like, when bugs come out of their mouths, or when the laser from the shamrock shoots a lady in the mouth and a spider crawls out. Like, holy fuck.
I don't know if they did 3D with that one.
They generally did it with the 3D.
That would be creepy in 3D.
With Friday the 13th part 3, they did do 3D.
They did, yeah. And I guess like that was kind of an experiment at the time to see if it would make money. But which one is the Friday the 13th one where he's like a snake and he crawls inside a woman's private parts and comes back to life?
That's not a Friday the 13th, Mike. No. That is Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday.
Yeah.
At that point, they were having rights troubles back then even.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you look at all these franchises, they kind of drop off after the first film in a way. Like Halloween, like the first one I love. I feel like it does a wonderful job. Like, it's not scary by today's standards, but I love how it builds tension and atmosphere, and like the lighting and the cinematography is just fantastic in it. Although it's like this low budget film. And I think that's what makes it so much better than something like Friday the 13th, which looks kind of cheap, but it is fun, I will admit. But at a certain point, like all these kind of dropped off. I think the one with the best track record might be the Scream series, which is funny because all horror movies are like people who like are not aware they're in a horror film, and those horror movies are about people who are very much aware that they're on a horror movie and commentate a lot on that. I mean, my personal taste with the Scream movies, I like the first 2. The rest just kind of bore me, and it's like, oh, here we go again. They're coming out with Scream 7 soon, which, whatever, fine.
Hey, 2
But,
weeks from
yeah.
tonight, buddy, you know you're going to be there.
I mean, I have to match. I have to meet the quota. So yeah.
By the way, may I ask a question of the two below me? I'll ask you too, Mike. I don't know if you've seen them all, but what is your favorite Jason kill in all of his lure?
Oh, I know mine.
When he
I know
punches
mine.
the dude's head off on the rooftop in Jason in Manhattan.
Yeah, that's Black Panther who thinks he can take him on, right?
Yeah. He's like, "Come on, man!" And then one hit.
I'll let Ethan. I'll let Ian.
In all the movies.
I'll let Ethan answer that one first.
It would probably have to be, and this is purely a nostalgia and a mystery reason. I mentioned it before, is part 2, where the couple gets speared through the bed together while they're having sex. Because in the early days of VHS, on the back cover, they showed scenes from the movie, of course, and they showed a scene from that moment of the spear going into the guy's back, and there's a pool of blood, and you can kind of see the girl's face who's underneath, and she's horrified. But that was not in the movie. And no one had seen that footage for literally almost 4 decades. Whoa. Until someone found a VHS tape of special effects tests and raw footage from that sequel in a garage, and they restored it with the Shout Factory people, and they put that onto the Blu-ray, so you get to see the entire thing, and it really is terrifying because you feel the helplessness and the violence of it. So that's probably my favorite kill, even though it's ripped off allegedly from Bay of Blood, which I think the version that's in that movie is creepier because after the couple is impaled, their bodies keep moving as if they're in the act of passion. It's really creepy.
Oh, but, wow. I got to see that now.
Yeah.
But that's
Bay of Blood is great. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, mine's just the opposite. It's probably one of the goofiest ones. But it's the ones that I love because it shows how innovative Jason is, regardless of what time period he's in. I'm talking about Jason X. Okay, there's some people who hate Jason. I love Jason X because it was one that wasn't afraid to, one, make fun of itself, and two, still give us Jason in just a fun way. But my favorite death is he gets thawed out. The spaceship has come. It's been 100 years since the Earth has been habitable. They find him in cryogenics. They thaw him out. And the minute they thaw him out, they don't realize it's zombie Jason, of course. So the minute he's thawed out and it's got a little bit of warmth to him, he wakes up, and there's a woman in the area that's got a vat of liquid nitrogen to fast freeze vegetables and samples. Jason gets up, looks at what she's doing for just a brief second, goes, "Oh, okay," grabs her head, shoves it into liquid nitrogen till it freezes, and she's screaming, and she doesn't scream long, and then her face freezes. Then he picks her head up and smashes it on the counter, and it shatters into like a million pieces. I don't know why that specific kill, but when I saw that kill, it just warmed my slasher heart, going, okay, here we go. Jason don't care. He's in the future. He'll find whatever he can to kill people.
Well, there's so many levels to that kill. There's the thawing, there's the grabbing, there's the freezing, and then there's the smashing.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because I think part of what makes movies kind of even weirder sort of evolution is when they become a collective punchline. There's movies that are terrifying and scary, and yet we've seen them vamped and parodied and all that kind of stuff, and they become laughable. But I mean, I remember one year at the MTV Movie Awards, they gave the Life Achievement Award to Jason Voorhees, and of course he comes up. They've got somebody in there, and he's grunting as he's holding the popcorn bucket. But the montage of his greatest hits before that, "To My Way" by Frank Sinatra. And I never really thought of it as funny before I saw him, continually hitting that sleeping bag against the tree until you've seen it done to "For what is a bam, 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 what has he got? Boom, boom." I mean, it made it sublime.
I wish I got that. That's really creative.
I remember that. I remember seeing that. That was hilarious. See, and
I'm sorry.
And us, I'm sure some people would tune in and look at us and go, "Well, you're laughing at these deaths." I'm like, I explained it to someone once because I had someone ask me, how can you watch the horror film? You know, why? And I'm like, well, one, if you talk to the majority of horror fans, they tend to be the nicest, calmest people you may have met. They're, you know, like Good Samaritan type folks. They donate to a lot. They do, because here's the thing is what people, I think, get the misconception that those who especially consume a lot of horror or whatever are watching it because of that. And it's like, well, it's escapism. But at the end of the day, we all know, except unless you get a ghoul movie, if you get one of those ghoulish movies. But as far as the rest of the ones which we've talked about tonight, you know, at the end of the day, once they cut, someone got up and walked away. You know, you're not watching an actual death. And that's in the back of your head for most horror fans. Now, again, there's, of course, there's exceptions, and those are a different genre and a different type of viewer, but your average horror fan who consumes Friday the 13th and Jason and all of these, Chucky and Hellraiser and all these, you know, at the end of the day that someone got up from that. You know, this isn't a real kill. So you have a little bit of a safety, but at the same time, you can also be disturbed, or you can wince, or you're like, or you feel that tension and you get scares. You know, one of the things that I don't like about Blair Witch, and I'm saying that I don't like Blair Witch. The reason I don't like Blair Witch is there is no release for your creep and your scare and your tension in that movie. You know, while I don't like jump scares, if they're effective, you need that for your audience. Because if you keep making your audience uncomfortable, but you don't give them something to either release or jump or react to, you get to the end and now you're just uncomfortable.
I think I liked Blair Witch for that reason, because it felt real and tangible, and it wasn't like, oh, let's put in the comic relief. But I totally get it. I actually have a funny story.
People thought it was real when they went and saw it.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing.
I think one of those instances where, you know, the marketing was so effective that ultimately, I think at the end of the day, it hurt the reputation of the film because it didn't live up to the marketing.
And
well, yeah, I had a buddy. We were driving back from, we had to go out of town to go see it. We went as a group of friends to go see Blair Witch because of the hype, the everything, the book, the fake documentary, whatever. We had to go see it. Now, I knew it was, I had already looked on early internet, but still knew that it was kind of, you know, staged and set up. It was set up. But I had a friend of ours who didn't see it, that all of that. They went into it and they were like, we're driving home. And then I mentioned, yeah, it's just too bad that it was all, you know, set up and fake. And he goes, oh, that was fake? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, that could have been a lot better then.
Well, they tried to with the Blair Witch sequel, Book of Shadows, or whatever the hell it was called.
Try is a strong word for what they tried.
They tried to make a more conventional movie, and that blew up in their face. And then they were like, okay, we'll make another found footage movie, and that didn't really work out. But yeah, like the kills in slashers, or more like they're kind of like the kills in Mortal Kombat. You know that they're silly, they're goofy, you're meant to laugh at it. It's kind of like cartoonish fun kills, you know, compared to if you play a video game like Manhunter, where that's just snuff film disturbing kills. You know, there's a reason why Friday the 13th is fun and Come and See is legitimately horrifying, you know, because that's about real people doing real horrifying things. And it's fun to see something where you're like, okay, I get to enjoy violence, but it's kind of like watered down without being watered down, if that makes sense. Like, it's made to be over the top and silly and fun. And yeah, it's not sadistic. It's more like, because like even kids like it. Like, for instance, I think the slasher genre is kind of getting repopularized thanks to video games now, with games like Dead by Daylight. And I probably shouldn't let him do it, but I let my like little nephew play that game, and he loves to play as a Demogorgon and put people on a meat hook. You know, that doesn't mean that he's insane. It just means that he knows it's fake and it's silly and it's not real. You know, and you can tell when it's not done in a realistic way, no matter what age you are, because it's like in Mortal Kombat, it's not really easy to rip someone's heart out, you know, but you see it in a game and you kind of go, oh,
you don't agree with that, Mark?
Huh?
Would your Uncle Ed agree with that?
He would because he usually picked on the dead because it was a lot easier to get to him. So he didn't actually kill that many people. But no, I mean that's at the end of the day, especially with slashers. Now we're horror. We consume horror. I consume a lot of horror, and there is different horror, and there is horror that's meant to completely disturb you and bother you and just completely like, oh my God. And those are the movies that most horror fans will consume maybe once and not again. Like I've seen I Spit on Your Grave, Day of the Woman multiple times, but not recreationally. I've seen it when I had a friend who was curious about watching the film, and I would tell him, don't watch the film by yourself. I will watch it with you because I know what's coming and what to expect. And it helps them usually because you do have your rape revenge stories, which are disturbing, which I hate to say it are, they have their place. But as far as for disturbing your audience, it's a little bit of a lower hanging fruit because of what they depict is so brutal and straightforward and plays really to your core. Whereas you get the slasher, whereas what you were saying, not all of them are cartoony, but at the same time, they go to such extremes that your brain first is shocked. And then you're just like, oh. Even the Terrifier films, when they first, he first does the kill, you're like, okay. And then by the end, when he's completely like totally just gutted and by that point, you're just like, okay. And then you're just like, that's a really good looking prosthetic. I mean, it's one of those things
they tend to be a little more fantastical in a way.
Right. That's the word. Thank you, Jeff.
Maybe splitting hairs, but I think it's an important difference.
I will say I can't watch Terrifier because that one is a little too graphic for me. I saw the mashed potato scene, and I'm like, okay, that's just fucking disgusting. Like that's not even.
I still have not watched the Terrifier movies yet. I gotta do that, but sorry, I'm losing my voice a bit. I would say, there's a difference, and Mark, you kind of alluded to this. The movies that are meant to disturb people. I mean, I Spit on Your Grave it's more in the R&R. Genre, not so much slasher. But then you go to another movie that came out in 1980, Maniac, which is very much you're in being put into the mind of the killer. That film has its goofiness too, like when he's pretending to be that fashion reporter or whatever. But then you jump forward into the next, I guess further into the decade with John McNaughton's Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, and then you get into I think the early 2000s or mid 2000s with Fred Vogel's August Underground series, which are, I think I have all of them, and I think I've only watched one. I bought him off of him at a convention when I met him.
Nice.
And thanked him for making those movies because they are really chilling and terrifying because they're not just, I think, Jeff, you mentioned that Texas Chainsaw was made in sort of a pseudo documentary flair or style. August Underground is specifically made to look like a couple of people videotaping their mass murdering spree.
Right.
And it's so convincing and so well done and not at all over the top. So you're watching this to see, how many times can you watch a head explode? It's like home invasion, assaults of all different kinds involving families, involving children. It's really disturbing, but I appreciate the artistry of it because you have to know where the boundaries are. Like the ultimate edge is a snuff film, which nobody wants to see and is against the law. But like, can you create something that brings you right up to that precipice and is as disturbing? I mean, until I saw August Underground, for me, that line was Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. And I saw that in a midnight movie once back in the late 90s. It was a practically empty theater, but there was a guy who was sitting a few rows near me who sat the entire film resting on the seat in front of him, looking up at the screen as if he were in love. And me and my friend, we got the hell out of there as soon as the credits started.
And when you look at that guy, it's like,
and you didn't take the garbage out that night either. Let me tell you.
Well, and another thing though, there are what I referred to as the ghoulish films. There are the films like, we've come now to learn that the first Faces of Death, most of that was scripted and set up. Later ones weren't so much, but there are the ghoulish films of Traces of Death, which came out, which basically was someone getting crime scene footage, getting footage, a lot of, showing animals actually being killed, showing, footage that was actually taken from evidence of police of where people had committed suicide and that. And there are those films. Those are the truly ghoulish and disturbing. And those ones, horror fans will know what they're watching, and you get a different reaction than, say, watching Chucky or Hellraiser or Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or Scream. You know what those are. It's what I was saying before. People got up at the end of the day. You know that this is...
But they're also delivered with either a little bit of supernaturalness or fantastical,
right?
Dare I say, franchise characters? So walking in that you're kind of signing up for something silly. By the way, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this before, but maybe you guys know it. But I'll share it with our audience. Apparently, about 3 years ago, they did a psychological test with some study, and they hooked electrodes up to people watching horror movies, and they did about 100 horror movies. And do you know which one was considered to be the scariest based on heart rate, on people watching it through the entire movie and how their heart rate reacted? It was actually Sinister. And I think part of that is because we relate to Ethan Hawke as the writer watching these, to your point, Ian, these sort of home movies, these snuff movies that seem outside of the Bagul character who's, sneaking in the corner in the water of the swimming pool. Seems very possible because it looks real. But that was considered to be the hardest sit for these people who signed up for the experiment, and they watched all these other things. But I think, they probably realized, yes, it's fantastical. Yes, this is a franchise character. Some of these things are played a little bit more ghoulish. But I tell you, you don't need Bagul in the scene where that lawnmower in the rain runs over the family that's laying there. I mean, I watched that with my ex-wife at the time, and we almost had to turn it off. I said, this is brilliant, though, because look at our reaction. Like, we're horror aficionados. We can watch anything. And we love Ethan Hawke. He's a great actor, and he gave such a great performance. And we barely made it to the end of that. I mean, we're just like, fuck, this is so scary.
Yeah. I think the realer it is, the harder it is to watch.
Sure.
Which is why horror films are fun to watch, because they're not very real. They're
That's why
played up.
Jaws got a PG rating at the time versus The Godfather. They said watching Sonny Corleone blasted away by human beings is much more horrific than watching a shark that ostensibly outside in the world of nature is just looking for a meal.
Yeah.
But this is a vengeful shark. He keeps jumping at that boat, and come on, he's on the deck. But did he miss the last 20 minutes? But anyway, that's how they got the PG-13 rating, as they said, it's part of a shark's meal program. Sonny Corleone getting blasted at the toll booth, not part of the toll.
Yeah, which is funny because The Godfather is kind of like a fantastical look at the mafia. They're not filled with honor like they have in the movies. But
but that's why the deaths are so over the top, though, in slasher films. That's why they're creative. That's why your killer doesn't just stab the person, they stab them hard enough to stick them on a wall. Now, we've heard some stories of killers doing that. It's very rare, but when you're watching it and witnessing it, it takes just a little bit of the edge off than, say, a De Palma kill where you have someone who jumps on someone and starts stabbing, and you hear the squishy noise of it being stabbing and someone actually screaming bloody terror, and it's in an elevator or whatnot.
That was awful.
That's more disturbing than pretty much any kill that Jason does. It's, and that's the thing is, and there is a fine line. I mean, Jeff put it greatly, is that there's a fine line with that. It's very thin, but it's there. And those who make, some of the most memorable horror films, kind of, they know how to weave that to just enough, take the audience just enough there and go, nah, look, here we stab a couple through who were having sex. It's
Yeah.
like,
Brian De Palma, to mention De Palma, he seemed to forget that the longer his film crew went on. A lot of times, I think he wanted it to be serious, maybe like The Godfather, so the deaths became more brutal. And like, for example, after the ex-husband kills his ex-wife with the drill bit that is like 18 inches long, he gets done away with just the dog jumping out of the window of the back of the truck and falls into the water. It's like, well, that isn't enough of a death. And yet, a decade earlier in The Fury, Amy Irving finally says, I've had enough of this crap that you're feeding me about my psychology and my brain power and how I can be a weapon. And she explodes John Cassavetes in one of the greatest final shots.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And then De Palma's like, that was so good. I'm going to show it 3 more times. So it's like, oh, we do the high angle. Well, I thought that was maybe overkill. No, we shot it. We're using it.
Yeah. Well, De Palma was great with violence. He got away with so much like Scarface. Like when he was showing it to the censors, they said, no, this is too violent. Okay. And then he would just make it worse each time. And eventually they're just like, yeah, this is good. So
we probably went back to the original cut and said, oh, yeah, that's much better. Thanks for the improvement.
That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's how you trick them. You just fool with their memory, But this was a fun discussion. I'm glad that we were able to have this. I think I do have to take a shower after this. Hopefully I'll be okay. Maybe I'll have some Hershey's chocolate milk before I
go. Lock the door though, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Mike, I would recommend, watch Friday the 13th parts 4 through 6, because that's what is referred to as the Tommy Jarvis trilogy.
Right.
There's a character in there who starts off as Corey Feldman in part 4. He's a little boy, and then he grows into a man over the course of the next few films. This is where a lot of horror franchises started getting into mini franchises involving kind of recurring surviving characters facing off against the killer in various iterations. At the beginning of part 4, you get a summary of what happened in parts 1 through 3, so you're not necessarily missing anything. But if you want Friday the 13th with some great kills, some pretty decent character work, and also I'll just say it, a great story in part 6, which is Tom McLaughlin's homage to Universal classic monsters, specifically Frankenstein. And it's also got a tremendous sense of humor, and it's the only one of these movies up until that point to actually feature kids at the summer camp. And what does that new ingredient involve? What does that do when you've got Jason Voorhees lurking around, offing people? Check that out. It might, I'm not saying it's going to make your assessment of the first Friday the 13th go up, but it might make you think better of the series, specifically because you've only seen part 1, and then for some reason part 8. Oh my goodness.
I saw it on a VHS tape on a whim one day from a Blockbuster rental. So,
I get it, man, but that's like watching Halloween 6 and saying, "Yeah, I know what this series is about. I'm not going to watch it."
I know he's possessed. Yeah,
I want to go watch Jason in Space. I think I've missed that one.
Jason X. Oh, Jason X.
I missed that one.
Oh, I know a lot of fans don't like it. I love it because it's a wonderful tongue-in-cheek homage to all the films that came before it. They use it as that, and I personally thought it was really fun.
It's so much fun. Yeah, I saw it on a bootleg VHS. It was being passed around before the movie came out, and I still paid to go see it on the big screen when it came out back in 2001 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
So.
it's funny. Like I think horror genre, or the slasher genre, it's kind of picking up now with Terrifier, with the video games Dead by Daylight. I don't think it's going anywhere, but and there's more fun ones. I'm kind of hesitant to see Terrifier because I saw one clip from one of the kills, and that was
Terrifier. Here's the thing with Terrifier. I appreciate Terrifier for what it's done and for for what they did, especially the first one, which took forever for him to get that character to where it was. Terrifier, the clown character, has actually been around in various iterations for almost 10 years before the first Terrifier came out.
Wow.
He had All Hallows Eve, I think it was, and it was also, that character was also in another short. I mean, he was really trying to work at making that character click, and he finally did with Terrifier. And so mad props with that one. And then you get into 2 and 3, and it actually has taken the trajectory of many other slashers in many sense with the Terrifier, in which it's more of the gore and shock value and what can we just get away with.
And he seems to become more immortal too.
Right, and he's become more immortal in that too. They work another character, they work some other things into it, but the slasher genre is going to be around because one, horror fans, as much as we complain, oh, more of the same, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get butts in the seats. That's why we're in this horror renaissance over the last 8-9 years, when you've got these super hundreds of millions of dollars of comic book and other tentpole films. They got to pay with them some way. And how do they do that? They make a $10 million horror film that makes $50 million.
Yep.
That's
how Blumhouse made its name.
Well, that's how
they made $5 million films, and they brought in $60-70 million.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. They're easy to make. They're cheap. Paranormal Activity, super low budget, and they made a ton of those huge returns.
And studios rediscovered. I think that's why we see so many horror films now. I mean, at one point at my little 7-screen theater, every screen had a horror film, and I was just, I was in heaven. I'm like, yes. But the reason you have that now is because studios realize there is a core audience that's diehard that will go consume just about anything horror. They're cheap to make. They can get just about anybody for the films if they want. Maybe a breakout film or someone they're trying to maybe push, to be a bigger star. They get them in here to cut their chops. They make some money, and then that money goes into the coffers so they can make their big films, because they're not making money on their big hundreds of millions of dollar films. But shit, you get a 300% return on a horror film. I'm going to make these until they stop getting money.
Oh, man.
Paranormal Activity would be a good one to reboot, because I think they went in the wrong direction by making it all about the sisters and their backstory. The plot is the ghost. These are ghosts, and we're filming them. And CC cameras are everywhere, so you could do Paranormal Activity in a morgue, Paranormal Activity at a college campus, Paranormal Activity in a deserted hospital. I mean, there's lots of places where you could tell ghost stories, and they'd all stand alone but be sort of part of this franchise, because it's all about found footage. But I didn't care about those sisters and their cult of women or whatever the hell that turned into.
I only saw the first one, and I remember at the time it was like maybe the 5th one was coming out. I was living in LA, and the producer of the movie was like telling me about how they're like cheap and how they're even easy to make, and they make huge returns. And I'm like, that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, and we got Spielberg blamed for our franchise because the first Paranormal Activity was not supposed to be a sequel. If you saw the original ending to the original first Paranormal Activity, there was no allusion to a sequel in that one. It was a hardcore ending. And then I think it was the story as Spielberg talked to the director going, oh, you could write it this way, write it with a cliffhanger.
And they had some special effects to it, which belied the $30,000 budget. It's like, the original footage was probably that. But by the time Mr. Spielberg was done with it, that added 100,000 or 200,000 onto it. So those effects are not cheap, folks.
Well, it's the same with Stuckman and Shelby Oaks. When they brought in Mike Flanagan and did all these reshoots and stuff. I'm like,
oh, is that the YouTubers movie?
And it's funny too, because Flanagan has done better with stuff that doesn't try so hard to be special effects. Ghosts just standing in the background of the haunted house in the house on Haunted Hill are so much scarier than some of the elaborate ruses that you do when you are given the money for it.
Well, I mean, I don't know what all was changed, but I would imagine if he's trying to work with what he has, which is the existing cut or the original cut of Shelby Oaks, there's probably only so much he could do in lieu of just saying, you know what, I'm going to remake this movie. I'll buy the rights from you, Chris, and this will just be between us.
It's still in my neon pack, and I'm like,
and it should stay there.
I don't think it's going in my Blu-ray player at all. it's staying where it is. Yeah, that's too bad. I like Chris Stuckman. I don't think he's like one of those like annoying YouTubers like Jeremy Johns, where it's like I saw this movie, and, whoa, bro, whoa, but.
Well, Stuckman annoys me for a different reason, which is that when he started making inroads in Hollywood, he made a video basically talking about, I'm only going to talk about movies that I like now. I'm not going to criticize films anymore. I'm like, well, then what good are you?
Then why
You're
are
just
you
a
a critic?
mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that's not being a critic. If you only talk about what you like, then you're just a PR campaign for other filmmakers.
Yeah,
But,
those damn YouTube movie reviewers. Fuck those guys.
Yeah,
No,
those
it's
guys
not.
are
It's not.
fucking
It's not
douchebags.
that. It's
I know what you're saying. No, I was
kidding.
just
Yeah.
I was just being self-deprecating.
I was the guy who started it with that YouTuber, but I mean, but the thing is, there are YouTubers who make good movies. You got the two, I don't know what the hell, they're Felipe, the guys who made
the Philippus, the Raka Raka,
Philippus. Yeah, the Raka Raka guys. They actually make good movies, which surprised me because the Raka Raka videos, they're high production value, but they're highly dumb. It's just, Ronald McDonald going around killing people and franchises of people beating each other up. But then it was like, oh, wait, they actually told a movie that actually had an interesting story and kept me engaged. Wow. Although their follow-up, I felt like they're kind of doing more of the same, so yeah. But guys, thank you so much for coming on. If you liked what you heard, remember to like, subscribe, share. You know the drill. Everyone tells you to do this on YouTube. But thank you, Jeff York, for the establishing shot, Ian Simmons from Kicking the Seat, Mark the Movie Cross-Check for Special Mark Productions. I'm Matt Crawley from You'll Probably Agree. So, folks, remember to stay safe out there. No, horror movies don't make you crazy for enjoying them. And be careful when you take a shower. Camping, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look, we have comments. I totally forgot about those. Real quickly, I'll show those. Someone says, hi, hey, Killer. Hey, Kilo 6 fan. Hi again. Right about what? Cool, I agree. Ooh, what happening here? We were talking about horror movies. And then Happy F13 BO, is that
Boys.
Happy Friday the 13th, boys.
Friday the 13th. For a second, I was thinking of F1, and I don't know why, but yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. And now they're making F2. So, boy.
FU? What? No.
Yeah. FU, F this franchise.
The only F I want is my Fast and Furious part, the final chapter in that.
What happened to that? That last one came out like 3 years ago.
It got delayed.
Now.
It's coming out next year.
Oh, cool.
Supposedly, by then everybody's gonna forget. They're like, "Wait, what?" But
26 years after the first one.
Oh my God! I remember at the time I thought that Gone in 60 Seconds was going to be the hit racing movie, and boy, was I wrong. All right. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on. Subscribe, all that stuff, and we will see you later. Be careful out there. Bye. Bye-bye.